Hey everyone, so I've decided to do this private video that I'm going to share when people ask some details about the tire carrier for the KL Trailhawk. And I say Trailhawk initially because I did design this with my Trailhawk, which has a rear tow hook. And so if you come around to the back and look, the hitch portion where it attaches here, this represents where the hook would be. This portion actually sits down on that hook. And so that balances the whole load of the equipment between two separate mounting points on the rear end. And for that reason, I've designed it with the Trailhawk in mind. This might be possible without it. You'll have to change it a little bit. There might be a way to tie it into the bumper frame, something to that effect. And then I want to also note here that if I had it to do again, and I suppose I still could do this, but I just haven't, is I really should have just bought another hook, ground the red coating off, and then welded the thing right there, permanently in place, so that it's a part of keeping everything stable. Because the biggest fight I've had is, even though if you look here close, this has got welds on the corners. It's even got it on the other side as well. To stabilize this, keeping this from doing that inside the hitch receiver has been my biggest battle with this. This was basically like a little homemade silencer I tried to attach to, and it helps, but it really doesn't completely solve the problem. Inside the hitch, this still wobbles a little and creates a little bit of vibration on your tire. I think welding that hook in and then having it bolt tight will solve that. Regardless, for me, it's still easier just to slap that thing on there for the moment. That's why I just haven't done it. So that's something I would change about the current design, something that didn't work. So here's what did work well. Or actually, here's one other thing that didn't. I bought the pin here at Lowe's. It's a cheap pin. It's the thinnest piece of metal on the whole thing, pretty much. I just slapped it on with some angle steel. That little pin broke when I was on a hill parked one day and had this sitting open. Just because I was loading rounds, I was shooting up at the mountain and loading rounds in the back. And eventually that just kind of bent. And so we had to kind of finish breaking it so we could close it and drive home. But, you could probably find a much, that thing was a few bucks at Lowe's. You can find a much stronger pin probably online somewhere. That's something else I would change. I'd definitely buy a better pin. This over here was a little excessive, just to create a few holes, extra holes for the pin to sit in. But it also doubled as a step. When this thing's mounted in, I can stand there and climb up on my Jeep, and so I left it. I liked it. But really, it's just angle steel welded around the frame. And then this is just a spacer between the bar and the hook. There's a little space where between the hitch point and this didn't quite meet up, and that made up that difference. This pin that swings everything goes all the way through this beam, and this is basically just a 2x4 steel beam. Pretty much all this was made out of metal that I either had in the garage or someone gave to me. Which is why something like this up here at the top, I've also got angle steel. I ran out of the square tube and just had a thick piece of angle steel I stuck there, and it's still pretty strong. But if I had to do it again, I would go buy a whole stick of this just so I could finish it off with square tube. I kind of like that I was making it out of only stuff I already had, though, mostly. What else? Well, I'd say because of this top piece, I also don't really use the additional holes where this could detach and rise up and raise your tire for off-road, because I felt like it wasn't as strong up here at top as it was down there. Honestly, it probably holds just fine. But also, given that I had the issue of the hitch wobbling, I didn't want to raise that up, and so that became another mini problem for this design. Everything else, I mean, it's safe, it worked out. This is a license tag bracket. Colorado, I have to have it lit up, and so it's got some LEDs here that shine on my plate when it's attached. That goes through the tire. It's just some little quick disconnects. Pretty simple. Tire sits on here. When I welded that on, I got one of those a little crooked. It didn't matter. It works fine. The neck here is just a piece of the same tube that was at the bottom. The rectangle beam, 2x4. That goes into the back of the tire and meets the steel rim out here and gives it a little space for the tire to actually sit there. What else? Let's move to the latch. So the latch down here works really well. This is all really nice and thick and sturdy. Hooks down, and there's that piece there that it hooks onto. And that meets metal on metal. Once that connects, it's contacting each other right there. It can't bob, wiggle, up and down, move, any of that. So there's a rubber piece back here that this hits against. This is really just kind of cut and bent into there, which is, you know, a year later it's finally kind of starting to crack and age, but it's just a piece of metal that sits on. The contact is a stop when it comes. Instead of meeting clink metal on metal, it kind of meets rubber to steel instead. Because this is distributed between two points when it's open, I didn't bother to wrap this piece over and weld a plate here. If you were going to do this to a non-Trailhawk without that piece over there, I would definitely want something that wrapped over this whole hitch carrier in order to carry that weight. I would still try to tie it into the bumper in the back here somewhere though, where our hook is. Everything else worked pretty well. Here's I guess was the trickiest part, because here it's flat. When you look at the back and the way the tire carries, it's centered on the Jeep and it's flat. But your hook curves, and so this material here, when it was still raw steel, what I ended up doing was cutting an angle, a very small angle, and then took the material and flipped it. And that made, instead of being straight, it gave it a slight angle. And I did the same thing right up here to this area where I got a bit of a curve, so that this part meets this angle, but over here, the rest of that meets this flat angle. So once it closes, this part's still flat, and all of this part's flat to each other and curves. And comes over here and sits right on top of your hook. And then once that's open, your hook over here is carrying, I mean, this is still carrying part of the weight. You can tell my foot's here. And so your hitch is still doing a lot of the work, but it's keeping it from leaning down any excess, letting it stress the metal by sitting on top of your hook there. And so that's really what I liked about this, what I think worked well, and what I think would continue to work well if you really just bought yourself a spare hook and tied it in permanently. What else? So one more thing I thought of. This right here, I ended up welding a plate onto my hitch on the end. Really, you could probably go get that smaller solid insert that still got a ball on it and weld all that on there together and actually still be able to use your hitch with this setup. You might reduce its tongue weight a little there. However, I would be mindful of that. I wouldn't go hanging a motorcycle off of it. Other than that, I think it would be fine. For something like, you know, adding your, maybe your high lift jack or some fuel, water, etc. Making a place for that on something like this. I think it would carry all that still. And still be able to pull a basic trailer, something small. Anyway, what else can I tell you about the design? I gotta stay there. I've got a tape measure. Let's do a couple of quick measurements. The rough height of the whole thing came out to be about 27 inches. The entire length is about 26. angle of the stretch there is 27. The piece of hitch I've used here is 1 foot and 1/2 inch. My neck off of this bar is 7.5 inches. This whole piece here. This right here is really gives you this piece gives you an idea of like you should be working with fairly thick metal to make all this. So it's really sturdy. See that? That really gives it that ability to just not wobble and be really stiff, strong. It's going to carry your steel tire, especially an oversized 32-inch tire like I've got. Use grade 8 hardware. I actually ended up using. It looks like I used grade 5 on this, but I mean there's 3 of them. If I had to do it again, I would use grade 8. This is what I had in my garage. So that's pretty much what I can tell you about it. I'll try to answer any questions in the comments, usually on Facebook or Instagram. Occasionally I get on Twitter and answer people, this or that. I don't use it as much, but I'll try and help people build their own. And when you send me pictures, I'll do my best to help you assess it, tell you if I think you're going in the right direction. But that's pretty much all I can do. I don't think I've left anything out for the moment, so I think I'm going to call it there. Good luck, everybody, and happy trails.